Hello, baby. Hello. You just joined another episode of A Journey with Bernie. And I'm so excited, folks, to have you on board, particularly on this beautiful day here in Japan's capital. Yes, folks, it's not Nepal, it's not Kathmandu, it's not Mera Peak. This time I'm in Tokyo, Japan. And there are many reasons why I'm enjoying this beautiful country and the exceptional hospitality. But Ben OBorne, you are my guest today, and I'm going to let the listeners know very, very shortly as to why you are my special guest. But what do you think of this beautiful country? Isn't it sensational?
Well, welcome, Bernie, the international man of mystery. So good to see
Don't you talk, mate. You've been everywhere. We're going to be investigating that today. But right now, you're in Japan. What do you think of this lovely country?
Well, it's an incredible place with amazing food, amazing culture, amazing people.
Yeah.
And it's been an absolute joy to be here the last couple of years.
Last couple of years.
Yes,
So that puts you right dead smack in the middle of COVID when you arrived.
That's right. Yeah, well, actually, just before living out of hotels, I got maybe 3 or 4 months of Tokyo without COVID.
Mate, and that's in a country that literally did shut itself down up until what, a couple of weeks ago.
In a really big way.
So, mate, once you got in here, you were locked in.
Well, look, what a very strange time to be starting a new role in a brand new country.
Now, tell me, this role that you're talking, I know about it, but our listeners don't. Why am I talking? Well, I know why I'm talking to you today, but I've got some very, very special reasons, which I'm going to let listeners know about shortly. But you have a very, very special role in this country in a very prominent organisation.
Yeah, so I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Domino's Pizza Japan. Have been for a couple of years. I've been with the business Domino's longer than I haven't in my life. I've worked for Domino's.
Well, mate, I've been with Domino's for donkey's years, 20 plus years. When did we first meet? There we are, listeners. I'm letting you know about the association now. We met how long ago?
So it must have been around 10 years ago, I reckon.
Mate, you were a pup.
I reckon you're aging backwards now these days. If you're looking back.
I'm trying hard, mate. I'm trying hard. So we met 10 years ago. What were you, in your mid-20s?
Around it, yeah. It was 24, 25.
24, 25,
yeah.
mate. So that makes you 34 now.
35, just
35.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate. I should have been aware and kept that year on board. Hey, buddy, I'm going to let the listeners know now why I've chosen you. And you've known that I've wanted to come over here to Japan and do this podcast with you for a long
Absolutely.
time. In fact, around about episode number 1, 2, or 3, I got in touch with you and said, when I come to Japan, we're doing it. Right? But here's the reason why. Listeners, you're going to hear, I'm not going to even talk about the story of the young man, although the story is important because of the outcome I believe it's produced. Now, you're going to correct me, that's okay. But we're talking to a 34-year-old who's a chief operating officer of a major company like Domino's, 1,000 stores in Japan.
Almost
1,000. So, and it's a growing, evolving business, dear people. But what's amazing is how Ben, at 34, has got the role. And if you listen to his resume and, read all the wonderful things that he's done, the skill of the guy is obvious. But I'm going to say something, having watched him in action for a decade now, I think it's got very little to do with your skill. I don't find too many of your peers that are capable of connecting with people. I'm going to use a couple of words here, and you're going to have to respond to them or throw them out the door. Right?
Sure, okay.
Rarely do I see someone in such a position of leadership that treats the staff that they manage with such equity. Now, when I use the word equity, I think many of your peers, Ben, would perhaps not know fully how to handle that status, that title, that supposed power, and they play roles of dominance. You don't do that, but you've never done that. I've known you for 10 years. And I've got to find out the secret on how you got there so quickly, so early in your life. So that's where we're heading with this.
Of course,
this podcast, right?
What's this podcast about again?
Mate, you were supposed to learn that before you came. This podcast, Ben, is all about exactly what I'm talking about, because connectability with other human beings, a care, I want to listen to other human beings, irrespective of title or status, is what this podcast is all about. Another way of putting it is, it's how do you become a more loving human being? How do you actually create a joy that you express in humanity that also rewards you in your life? And buddy, I'm really confident that at 34 years of age, you lead a pretty meaningful life. Life treats you pretty darn well, because you have grown to a stature that demands that. Now, I haven't finished yet. Connectable. You're a listener. You're inclusive of people. And this is not because it's an easy way to go about it. It's because you buddy, you know it works. But my question to you is right up front, and maybe you might have to go back in time here. How did you become that so quickly, so early in your life? I think you've been blessed to arrive there. How did you get there, Ben? Take us back to childhood. Take us back to the early days. What was the foundation of it all?
Well, I grew up in a very, very small little country town of around 1,000 people, around 25, 30 minutes outside of Albury.
I want to know the name of it.
Jindera.
Mate, can I just say something? I think it went through a flood last night. Did you hear? Oh, no, I don't mean to be a dampener into it, but there was a whole host of towns in and around Albury that went through.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me. It's a bit of a flatland.
Mate, yeah. I apologise, but it just occurred to me. I heard that name, and it's so unusual that a small country town of 1,000 people.
I think it's about 1,500 now.
It's growing.
It's growing, yeah.
What was life in Jindera like?
Well, it was a good, small little country community, and it was not too far from a bigger town like Albury, where I went to high school, but lots of really small community things going on. The local tennis club, meeting people through that. It was a quaint little town.
Yeah.
One roundabout.
And what did you do in your, let's go back to primary school. Who were you in your 0 to 7 formative years?
Well, geez, that's a long time ago now, Bernie.
Yeah, mate, it's got to be a couple of highlights.
Well, I guess I grew up, my parents split up when I was quite young, about 5 years old, and at the time we were living in Brisbane, and then we moved back to Jindera with Mum, and grew up a lot with Mum. And, the thing, my relationship with Mum has always been one of, it's almost like a friendship, where even since I was a young kid, she never spoke to me, down to me, as if I was a child and needed to learn this lesson. It was always as an adult where I could understand the consequences of my actions, or, there was never any time where she felt like it was a waste of time to explain something in detail to me when I asked why, and wanted to know more about the world. And we spent a lot of time together when I was, that 5, 6, 7, 8 onwards age, sit at home playing cards and just talking, conversating for hours.
Got to ask you, what game of cards?
Cribbage.
Oh, get out of it. Mate, that's for the elderly.
I know, yeah. I'm 35, baby.
The only reason why I asked, I thought it was going to be 500. That's what I played growing up. So here you are with Mum, you're playing cribbage. It's fascinating that she gave you the why. Did she also foster that in you as well, to be inquisitive?
I think so, but also, I've also always been really close with my dad as well, and the conversations I've had with my dad on the phone from when I was a kid to now today living in Tokyo would go for hours on end. I mean, bottle of red wine and 3 or 4 hours on the phone.
Even now?
Even now, yeah.
Wow.
And they are conversations that start in one place, catching up, but he's a master of, bringing out a conversation. So they go down these rabbit warrens, getting right into depths about politics or ways things work in the world. So I think both my parents had just these in-depth conversations with me from the very, very get-go.
It sounds as if they fostered an ingredient that I think is you, based upon my decade, and that is an attribute of curiosity. I've got mum modelling the why. She's actually encouraging you to be the why, and here's dad talking to you about a whole host of different subjects unashamedly.
Absolutely.
Is that a fair imagination of mine?
Yeah, definitely. And you're really learning the art of conversation as well.
Yeah. Have you brought with you that ingredient of presenting the why, and is it part of your style today that you enjoy giving good reason? Go to, I suppose, I don't want to jump away from primary school and those early days too soon, but I want to know how those early days are formative to you now.
I think so, Bertie. When working with a team of people, colleagues, really getting people to understand the why, explaining that from the very get-go. I mean, there's some great books of very similar titles of what I just said. Start with why, etc. I think it's just the key to getting people on board with you. It's the key to influencing people. You can't expect people to believe in what you believe or back you into something if you haven't explained why they're doing it. Their passion towards it won't be there. Their strive to go after it won't be there. And so it's, the first thing I do with franchisees in the business today, try and be really transparent, try and talk through the reasoning why, understand from their perspective as well, and explain how it's going to benefit them. Absolutely core, I think.
Without the why, it's just a statement. It's just a directive, isn't it? But the why gives them reason to believe. Yeah. Where you go?
There's a great story about two stonemasons.
Tell me about it.
The story about the two stonemasons?
No, I'm about to hear it.
You walk up to the first stonemason, and he's building a wall, brick after brick, in the hot sun bearing down, and he's sweating profusely. It's hard, long work. And you ask him, do you like your job? And he says, no. It's backbreaking work. I'm here for 12 hours a day. I don't know what I'm building. No idea. And I go home tired. I see my family. It's dreadful, dreadful work. And you go to the second guy who's also building the same wall, laying the bricks. Do you like your job? And he says, it's really hard work. It's backbreaking work. It's hot. It's in the sun. It's sweaty. I don't know if I'm going to get to see this wall finished, but it'll be finished one day. I'm building a cathedral.
Wow.
This will stand for thousands of years after I build this.
Yeah. So your point of the story is that the why also creates purpose.
Well, why is purpose?
Yeah. And would you say that honestly, that is something that is one part of your management practice now, almost instinctively, and you actually believe that it was founded by the way that you were parented?
I believe so. You have to start in that position, from that place, because unless you want to walk through your life leading a team and micromanaging every single thing they do, because you give them a directive, or you're going to line up the next directive and the next directive. If you want them to think and engage, and you want to utilize their abilities and their what they can achieve and get the most out of them, well, give them that purpose, let them run with it, let them achieve.
Let me say something that may sound a little bit out of place, but I'm aware that you've been recently married. Now, that's another story. And well, listeners, it is a story yet to come. But even in marriage, for example, do you find that conversations with Cassia also demand at times that you deliver the why, rather than me making statements to each other? Do you find that even in the context of a treasured relationship, that the why is also important?
Well, of course, because, it's a given. I mean, you have to, it's any conversation, Bernie.
Yeah. But it's something, therefore, that is a real benefit if it becomes a standard behaviour, as opposed to someone who's just directing, making statements, asking people to believe but not giving them the reason why. Does it build trust?
Well, of course, because then people feel like they're part of the solution. If they're understanding why and you're letting them the freedom to actually engage with that purpose and actually push towards an outcome, then of course it builds trust, because they feel part of the solution.
I've spoken to you before about some of your management practices, and I know that the building of trust with you is key. Could you comment on that, please? And not only how important it is, that's a little bit of a right? But ways and means of building trust. You've mentioned the why, giving the reason is important. Are there other mechanisms that you use in all aspects of your life to build trust?
I think trust starts from empathy and transparency.
I like that.
Because if you can sit there and have a conversation with someone and look at whatever is in front of you on the table through their eyes and really understand where they're coming from with something, that's a great foundation for trust. Right there. But then the flip side of that is you've got to be very transparent back with them and share where you're coming from with things. And sometimes there's situations where you can't share every piece of information. That's a reality. But you always share as much as you possibly can. And that's where you can come to an understanding. Now, an understanding doesn't mean agreement. And that's fine. Sometimes you've got to have tough conversations. Sometimes you need to leave a situation and go, well, we don't agree, but we understand each other. And that's perfectly fine. Having that relationship and that respect for someone's opinion and the way they see things and their history, where they're coming from, is, I think, the backbone to trust.
Mate, you're mentioning so many things. I don't know whether you're listening to yourself, but I am, right? You mentioned the word respect in there. You've mentioned the word transparency. You've mentioned the word or referred to an openness. You've mentioned tough love in there without exactly that phrase, but having the tough conversations. There's so many different elements in there. Let's not lose mum and dad.
Sure.
And primary school and growing up. Respect for people. Did that just come out of a 1500 town called Jindabyne? What did you do, growing up in your life? What people were in your life? Through what dimensions and avenues did people come into your life that taught you to respect the varied types of people that are in our communities?
I played a lot of sport, played a lot of field hockey when I was younger. Used to play around in a lot of bands throughout the years, which was great fun, and certainly met some interesting characters through doing that. It was always, I had a tight-knit group of sort of 5 or 6 very, very good friends.
Secondary school?
My best mate since 5 years old at primary school, also from Jindabyne.
Were they part of the hockey team?
No.
Well, at the moment, mate, I've got you playing in the 3 clubs at Jindabyne. I'm sure you're a much bigger hockey player than that. Give us your hockey resume.
I played a lot of sort of junior representative hockey and played state representative hockey.
For
first for Albury Wodonga and then for Victoria.
That's Victoria, okay. Yeah.
For the Victoria State team growing up, and that was a lot of commitment, I think. There's a lot of travelling from Jindura to Melbourne and back a couple of times a week, which is 3.5 hours each way for training sessions, practice matches, etc. And then a little bit later on, when I was about 17, started playing for the State League competition.
Explain State League.
Well, it was sort of the Albury seniors team playing against the rest of Victoria.
Like a Geelong?
Geelong,
St Kilda?
Geelong were never in the first.
Geelong think they're first and everything.
They might be now. I might be still mistaken. It's been a while. But so all teams around Melbourne go down there once a week and play. Bus down there with all the lads, and then bus back that night. So a lot of that, and then I sort of lost a little bit. I moved down to Geelong for university.
Right. Okay.
And realised that.
What did you study?
I did a double degree, so I did an arts degree and really majored in sociology.
Okay.
A little bit of a minor in philosophy, and then a commerce degree and majored in economics.
I've got to ask the question because this is interesting for me. What makes a young man choose sociology and philosophy? Like what fostered that?
Well, sociology always really interested me because I love the idea. I loved economics as well, and elements of sociology were almost this behavioural economics of people on a very large scale, and I found that very, very interesting.
Yeah.
The economic side I was always interested in, and then philosophy. I think you can learn so much from reading and understanding these ideas. It's almost a bit of a crossover between fiction and non-fiction. Some of the philosophy you read, because a lot of it is fiction and in stories, but it's dealing with humanity and things that are non-fiction and the way that we interact, the way that you can think about ways that you can think about the world.
Here's a funny question. Like you already at such a tender age trying to, answer the question, why the heck are we here? What's the purpose of our existence? And with some form of that question floating around, does that inspire a young man to want to look at sociology and how decisions and the way that society works reflects its attitudes towards each other? Are you looking at philosophy because you want answers?
I never really thought about it, Bernie. It was just interesting to me at the time. But now sitting here thinking about it,
I'm thinking about it for you, mate.
I think what still interests me about it today is probably what was interesting to me back then was less looking for an answer or a reason, but really wanting to understand people and loving to get little glimpses inside of how people make certain decisions, why people act in certain ways. That leads into economics as well. Certainly leads into sociology and behavioural economics.
I find this a little interesting discussion, and I'm going to make it personal here. Right? If people ask me about my childhood and my secondary school, I can't explain why, if I got an assignment, it was on Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Martin Luther King. I was just fascinated by what made people, not just them, but the process of finding meaning. I was always a curious bugger.
Oh,
does that ring a bell with you?
Certainly rings a bell for the Bernie, I know.
But is that...
No, it does, and not necessarily amazing people either.
Yeah.
But just, why does a certain group of people do certain things? You could be looking at a group that might be marginalised in society. What's led to that? Because it's not just someone was born like that. What social pressures are causing that to happen? That really interested me. But then, understanding the way people think about, the question of, why are we here, and understanding, reading from different perspectives through philosophy around that was really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why it might be, it's not an accusation, right? Why it might be innate for some, and yet for others, the question actually is too difficult to even consider and answer. What question am I talking about? Why the heck am I here? What brings meaning to life? And I'm sure everybody looks at the stars and goes one night, oh, why am I here? I'm sure everybody's been asked the question. But some want to answer it. Some want to find an answer to it, and others hear the question, but too hard, won't go there. And I just find that fascinating. Hey, go back. You're not just playing hockey, but you're playing with a lot of teams. You're playing in Albury. You're playing in State League. You're playing against the Metro guys. You're playing against a lot of good rural country teams that are all part of the State League. You're getting selected for Victoria, and you're playing in national competitions, perhaps an even international flavour here and there. But coupled with that, did I hear you say you're also part of a rock band?
I think back in those days it was probably there's a few metal bands, a couple of punk bands, but then later on we actually
you look like a punker
with a receding hairline, but a lot of rock music, a lot of blues influenced music as well. I love the blues, and certainly later more towards the rock side of things when I was living in Geelong and Melbourne. Playing gigs around the place,
But mate, there are some different characters. I haven't got the same characters that you're meeting in nighttime gigs as you're playing against in the hockey. Bring it to life for us. Give us the story about some of those rock, punk, heavy metal dudes that came into your life.
It's not so as nefarious as you would think, to be honest. But what it is a wonderful community of people from all different walks of life who come together to do something they love, something a little bit artistic, something where you're creating something with your friends, writing music together. They're coming together at the pub for a beer to enjoy that collectively. And the sense of camaraderie is just incredible. I could go through and tell you some stories about some big nights we had, but I don't think there's a lot of value in that.
What about relating to an audience? Because your audience is full of the many and the varied.
More the varied, not so much the many, unfortunately. But
relating to them, that must have taught you a lot.
Look, a little. I think. Sure, when you play some live gigs, writing music, it's I think important to write music that you really love. Not write music for other people, but certainly you think about how to put on a show and talking to people after the gig and making sure you're staying back and making those connections with people. So many great friends who came out of that still to this day that might have played in other bands, might not have, but you just afterwards you meet someone who's a lover of maybe one band you might have in common that you love, and you're talking after a gig somewhere, having a beer, and you might talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours. You might never see that person again. Or they might become one of your best friends.
How would you have coped if I'd been in the audience you'd met me, mate? We'd be talking about the Bee Gees. I think I would have lost you after 2 minutes.
Come on, man. I would have taken it as a project.
Well, even that's interesting. I know you said it jokingly, but isn't that a great exercise to do, to come across people whose interests are so adverse to your own, and yet it's like a project to learn how to be interested and to foster learnings from that person, even though their interests are so you must have been in that situation a number of times.
Well, of course, but just because you personally don't like some music just means that music just wasn't made for you. So understanding why someone else likes that music or likes whatever it might be that they're into is still a worthy exercise.
what did Ben OBorne learn? You know, what age are you by the time you're finishing your musical rock band status?
Well, I had to break up the band, or I had to leave the band. The boys are still playing under a different guise, but when I moved from Melbourne to Perth for a promotion job with Domino's, so that would have been 2014.
Okay, so what age are you then?
I would have been 27.
27, okay. So up until your mid-20s, what was the value to you in your life of meeting such a wide variety of people? And we've got to bear in mind, you're also being founded by good people in your life who have taught you to be inquisitive and curious. So I'm imagining you're actually bringing that, perhaps even unconsciously, to the way that you interact with this variety of people. But what's been the benefit to you as a human being from having that lifestyle with such a variable group of people?
Well, I guess you learn from that you can come from very different places, but all you got to do is find one common thing to connect.
Yeah.
It's very easy to find one common thing to connect with anybody.
Yeah.
And you get great practice at that, right? You meet so many people, and you've got the time then, because it's enjoyable time on the weekend or whatever.
Yeah.
Usually late at night. To sit and connect with all these different people from all different sorts of walks of life and understand.
But respond to this, please, pal. You don't do that unless you also see some equity with that person. And by the word equity, I mean, there you are, the lead singer. Like, if someone wants to take your time after the event, you're the lead singer, mate. You know, you haven't got the right. But there are going to be a few that would say, "Oh, thanks very much, thanks for your interest. I've got to go now. See you later." You know, but I got this image of you not only back then, but I also know how you manage people. You learn so much, but only if there is within you a feeling of equity. That's a statement. Could you respond to that?
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from. I mean, when you're approaching someone from that empathetic view.
Yeah, that's the key word. You know?
Right. When you're understanding where they're coming from, it almost has equity built into it as default. I mean, if you really want to understand, I don't know, I grew up in a very small country town. I didn't grow up in the middle of a city.
Yeah, but I think you're on it, mate.
I've always felt blessed that people would give me their time.
Wow. There's equity.
You know, like Bernie Kelly reaching out to do a podcast. Like, what the bloody hell does Bernie want to talk to me for?
Because of exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
That's, because of exactly what you just said.
Mm.
I mean, talk about an egoless statement. Yeah, and yet the egoless, the empathetic one, is the one that's in charge of, dare I say, ripples out to tens of thousands, maybe even more people, through the chief operating officer of Domino's Pizza here in Japan. How many people are in Japan? What's the population of Japan?
130 million.
130 million. Well, multiply Australia by 5 and we start to get somewhere in the vicinity, right? And while I'm not saying that you're tapping into 130 mil, I'm saying the scope of the amount of people that you ripple to is huge, Ben.
Mm.
And right from the start, I've been fascinated as to what is the foundation. And I reckon you just nailed it. Well, for me, I've got the little goosebump here because you just said you've always been interested in why people might be keen to learn from you.
Mm.
What have I got? Humility. I've got empathy. I've got equity. Are these the ingredients that actually make a great leader, a great manager? How do those ingredients foster such goodness, greatness, and effectiveness?
Well, I've thought for a number of years now that leadership is not the position. It's crazy to think so. Just because you're placed into a position somewhere doesn't mean that you suddenly you're deserving of some respect.
Yeah.
You're deserving of, people following your every word. You earn that with people.
Yeah.
And sometimes leadership isn't a position.
Yeah.
Sometimes a great leader can be someone who's lifting up people who's standing right next to them.
Wow, mate.
And so I don't see leadership in that way, and I couldn't. I would feel like an absolute, prat, I guess. If I walked into a room and said, well, this is the way it is because I say it is. No, it's not the way it works, because it comes back to things we were talking about earlier. I mean, if you want to get people, the best out of people, you can't do that by being a despot.
Yeah.
If you get the best out of people, you've got to motivate them to be all in for the cause, and the only way to do that is to sit and get them to understand why that cause is important.
Yeah. This is what have I got? Empathy. I got a joy or a want to listen. Oh wow, thank you for your interest in me. Now I've got all these ingredients. Does that bring you a lot of happiness? Does it bring you a lot of joy in your life?
I think so. Connecting with people is joy. And getting to that point of understanding with someone, whether they might be in your team, but then whether they just click and they get it.
Yeah.
Right? And they're chasing after as hard as they can with you, or working a lot with franchisees as business partners, and get that level of understanding with someone. It's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah.
And the trust comes from there, and if you can sit there and have that trust with someone, that level of understanding where they know that you've got their best interest at heart, and they feel that you're wanting them to succeed, and you're there for their success, then they'll follow you through hell and back. If you're a dictator, if you're a despot the person that walks in the room and says, this is how we do it, this is why we do it, and I don't want you to think about it, but you're going to go do it. The people will be out the door as soon as things get tough.
But it doesn't mean that you don't deliver tough love.
No, of course, you have to, But when you've built that level of trust, the tough love has so much more meaning. It really does.
But I think with you, Ben, when you deliver tough love, they still know it's love.
Well, and it should be. I really believe that you succeed as a team. Right. So if you're leading a team, it's the team that succeeds. And the accolades and the celebration, the joy go to the team. But you fail as a leader. The failure is on the leader, and that comes back to, well, maybe you recruited the wrong person. That can happen. Maybe you didn't deliver the right coaching, training, motivation, set the right goals, but it's back on you as a leader.
See, you just mentioned a word which has just distracted me. The word is coaching. You're going to be challenged with this question.
All right, let's go. Here we go.
Without talking about the things we've already spoken about, because of course they're the ingredients of a coach. You're a great coach. What do you see as other ingredients that make a great coach? You had some great coaches when you were part of the hockey scene. You're seeing some great corporate coaches, and you had a couple of beauties in your own Domino's Pizza.
One named, Bernie.
Oh, no, don't.
Kramer?
What are the ingredients of a great coach?
Look, I think, and whether this is a work team, a sports team, a great coach, great leader, they go hand in hand, is great at setting out goals, setting out the targets for the team, breaking them down, ensuring that everyone's on board with those targets, with those goals, whatever it might be, and then motivating them to chase really hard after it. You know, I really believe that no one wakes up in the morning and looks at themselves in the mirror and says, geez, I'm going to be really average today. I feel like I want to be really mediocre today. No one does that, but sometimes you see some leaders, some coaches do a really bad job of defining what a good job is.
Yeah.
A great coach really defines what a good job is.
Yeah.
And make sure that everyone's equipped, make sure that everyone's motivated.
Yeah.
To chase after whatever that good job might be defined as.
Yeah. What I find interesting there is you said he or she makes sure that they're equipped. He or she makes sure that they've got the right environment from which they draw motivational and energy, and they're empowered. It's almost as if the coach is focusing on making sure they got that equipment and capability to succeed. They've got the equipment to do so. We spoke about joy before. You've had a joyous. Well, you were supposed to have. I'm sure it has been a joyous couple of years because you got married to the lovely Cassia.
Yes.
Have I pronounced that right?
Kasia.
Oh, apologies, Cassia.
Forgive that.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, but I think we alluded earlier on in the podcast that started at your wedding came at a very, very interesting time. Hey, give us the dot point story because it's a ripper, folks.
It was a very interesting time. I mean, it was the beginning of February 2020,
COVID,
just before the world sort of imploded on itself a little bit.
Yeah.
And we got married, and then I was coming back to Tokyo. I'd been living in and out of hotels in Tokyo, then going back to Brisbane. We were living in at the time.
Had you just started here?
Yeah, I'd started here in the October beforehand.
Okay.
So I've been living here for 2 years. I've been working for this business for 3. But flying back and forth, and then we got married, and then spent 5 days together on a short little beach break before I flew back. Left Kasia at KL airport and flew back to Tokyo. She went
with KL.
Kuala Lumpur.
Oh, Kuala Lumpur. Yeah.
And she flew back to Brisbane, and then. About a month later, we had 5 happy married days together.
Yeah.
A month later, I flew back to Brisbane to pack all of our stuff up and put it in a shipping container and do the final move over to Tokyo. But my flight was probably the first flight back into Brisbane, at least, that had to self-quarantine. So that sort of pushed our moving date back a little bit. I had to...
14 days?
I think it might have been 10 back then.
Wow.
Too much has changed since then.
Yeah.
So observed that, sat at home for 10 days. It was probably a bit of a blessing because I got to go through and start packing boxes and whatever before leaving. The day finally comes, like leave quarantine, the removalists come, pack everything up, and we went and stayed a night in a hotel that night. I was staying in a hotel for 3 days to wrap up some work at our Brisbane office before the final big move to Tokyo. Kasia stayed one night and she left to Perth that next day to go see her parents for 2 weeks. Over there before she was going to also join me in Tokyo. But I wake up, she leaves in a taxi to the airport, takes off, and then that day, while she was in the air, Tokyo closed their borders.
Yeah.
And Perth closes their borders to the rest of Australia.
So she's in the air, about to land in Perth. with borders closed,
Yes.
and you're supposed to be meeting her in Tokyo later on?
Yeah, in a couple of weeks. Yeah. So anyway, I'm in Brisbane with my suitcase, a car that thankfully I hadn't been able to sell yet because the market I was just going to sell it off whatever I could on the way to the airport. And thought, what do I do now?
Yeah.
I can't go to Perth. I can't go to Tokyo. Mum, I drove 15 hours down to Mum's place and lived down there for 6 months.
6 months?
Yeah, six months, yeah.
Well, Cassie's locked in Perth.
Perth, yeah, we couldn't see each other. It was a great first, I guess, 9 months of marriage. The first 9 months of marriage, I think we probably spent around, I don't know, 3 weeks together.
Yeah. Now, don't you give me the country excuse like you gave me before. I want you to dig deep on this one. I would imagine you just got married. That's treasured love. Yeah.
The happiest day of your life, right?
Well, yes.
Walking out with friends and family there.
Certainly, I hope so. Wonderful celebrations. And then there is an eagerness and there's a look forward to the starting and the launch of your marriage. Now, I'm imagining that at the end of 9 months, the emotion of having to deal with this space between us and the imposition that COVID is placing upon you both is perhaps different at the 7, 8, 9 months than it is at the start. Go back to at the start. What were your... don't describe the frustrations, but just what were you learning about that from that situation and that circumstance? What were you learning about the preciousness of love? What were you learning about love as a result of this frustration that this pandemic that's come out of nowhere has placed upon you?
Yeah, well, between the both of us, there was a lot of, I wouldn't say, not fear, but certainly a lot of not knowing when we were going to take this big step we'd looked forward to. When were we going to be connected again? There was a fear of that, but through that we had a connection through that as well, where whilst the world was, and for us as partners was not feeling like it was being friendly. There's almost a love growing through this animosity to the situation we were in together.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. And animosity is maybe a tough word, but it was a moment for many people in the world that was full of doubt and not knowing what was around the corner. So staying connected in that time was really important, but talking through that time about whenever it was going to come, and we knew it would come eventually.
Yeah.
But talking about the things and the new experience we had around the corner, when that door did open, when those gates opened, when the flights were bookable again, we had this whole experience, this whole new culture, this whole new part of our lives as husband and wife to live in a brand new country to go and explore. So I think not consciously, but the way we dealt with that was through this level of excitement and this building this excitement for experience that we're about to go do together.
Are you saying that the doubt and the uncertainty that was created by the COVID scenario actually became, to some degree, a catalyst for intensifying your love?
I think so. It was, look, I'm sure that the first 6 months of marriage, 9 months of marriage, year of marriage being side by side with each other would be
You'd hope it's intense anyway.
Yeah, that's right. But certainly being so far apart, this level of excitement certainly kept us very close together. And it meant that once we hit the deck in Japan, full steam blazing, working very hard, but also is trying to see as much, do as much, walk as much, eat as much, understand as much about the culture.
Right.
And it's certainly made, that's carried on until today. Marsha's been living here almost 2 years now, and it's certainly made our love for exploring this country, I guess, it's carried through that whole time.
But what's interesting about all that description that you just gave in the last minute, it's all about shared experiences. It's almost as if the whole COVID scenario prepared you to launch yourselves into a whole series and range of different shared experiences.
Yeah, that's what it felt like anyway.
Benefit, please, of thirsting, actualizing those shared experiences. And the reason why I'm asking the question is because I'm also wondering about, couples who are in situations and scenarios where they've actually lost touch with the importance and the power of the shared experience. What's the value of the shared experience? Share it with us. What does the shared experience look like on a weekend in Tokyo now? What's it look like in recent months? For you and Kasia. What do you do to that define shared experiences?
Well, firstly, I think they're very important, because when you're learning things together and you're understanding more about the world together, what a bond that you build. But for us, every weekend, if it's not raining, we'll go for a big, long 30-kilometer walk through neighborhoods to a location somewhere in the outer suburbs of Tokyo where we haven't been before. You see so many different things that you don't see if you taxi or if you're on the subway. I've done a lot of travel around the country as well. A couple of weekends ago, we were in Kyoto. It's wonderful experiences there. Some Japanese cooking classes. We stayed at a really traditional ryokan hotel. Lots of temple visits and hiking. It's such a different country. It's a culture that was isolated from the rest of the world for so long. And there's just so much to see. And look, to be honest, you begin to develop these understandings of things together, but there's still so much more to learn about together, because it is a complex culture that's so different from a lot of the West. So, I look forward to just more and more of that. It's
wonderful, mate, wonderful. Give our listeners, we'll deviate for a moment, give our listeners here who may be contemplating, I want to visit Japan, I've always wanted to go to Japan. One thing that they must do if they come to Japan, is it one particular city they must visit? Is it one particular event that you can't miss out on? Is it Kyoto? Is it Osaka? Is there a little neighborhood in Tokyo that they must visit? What is the one? Please don't miss out on this, folks.
Oh, geez, that's tough, Bernie.
Well, I'll give you two then, if you've got so many.
Okay.
So I would be good, mate.
Setting up here. Jeez. No, I think the one thing I would experience, and I'm cheating here a little bit, Bernie, but I would take like I mentioned before, a very long stroll through some main neighborhoods through Tokyo. So I'd spend a weekend walking Tokyo.
Lovely.
Because there's the major attractions. People would go to Shibuya Crossing, they go to a Asakusa Temple. They might go to Kababashi and buy themselves a kitchen knife if they like to cook. But I think the beauty of Tokyo is in the back streets, and it's in the little suburbs, the little areas you go to, and there's just a whole street of shops. Something artisanal that they all do, pottery or something. And you really get a feel for the fact that Tokyo, it's not one CBD. There's no one central business district or one city. It's a group of many cities, and I think exploring those is we're still doing it every weekend that we're in Tokyo. And we're still finding new things a couple of years on, right? So
isn't that great? Gee, that appeals.
And then number two would be getting out of Tokyo, either Kyoto, which is a beautiful, very busy with tourists for sure, but it's busy for a reason. Or for me, my favorite place to go is the second biggest island to the south in Kyushu. there's landscapes in there that'll just blow your mind.
Yeah.
Areas that look like something out of Jurassic Park.
Wow.
With volcanoes and steam.
Yeah.
And there's just beautiful cities of such natural beauty, like Nagasaki, which is this amazing sort of bay with the hills rolling right down, mountains rolling right down into the bay. Kyushu is a wonderful place with some of my favorite food in Japan as well.
Wow. Speaking a bit about Japan now, we lot to learn from Japan. You just mentioned that. Can I share with you? I get fascinated by the Japanese hospitality culture. You're in an industry that can tap into, even utilize that hospitality. Could you describe some of the ingredients of that hospitality for our listeners that makes Japanese service so extraordinary?
Well, they call it omotenashi.
Say that one more time.
Omotenashi.
Omotenashi.
Yeah.
Omotenashi.
Natural.
Okay.
And you know, there's many lots of the traditions in omotenashi, the things you say, the bowing. A lot of it comes from the traditional tea ceremonies.
Yeah.
But really, it's all founded on the belief that no piece of hospitality is too big or too small if it improves your guest's experience.
Yeah.
So it's small things like offering you the little oshibori, the little towel at your table.
Had that before. Yeah.
In winter it's nice and warm.
Yeah.
In summer it's nice and iced and cold. Right?
It's everywhere.
There's little details. It's rushing to open the door for you.
Yeah.
It's arashimase, a wonderful greeting thanking you for joining. It's all those little things added up into that one sort of philosophy that no thing is too small or too big as long as it improves the customer's overall experience.
I reckon I've been to a few of those little backstreet little restaurants. They can only fit in 12 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even get to open the really big wooden door when I can see through the one window this 20-year-old young woman rushing to the door, and I'm sure it's not because she thinks I'm elderly. Right? Maybe it is. But she's opening this heavy door just to greet me.
Yeah.
I guess it's the only country in the world.
It's pretty incredible, and considering it's not a tipping culture, in fact, it would be seen, it's often spoken about, it's almost seen rude to tip because you're reducing them from the job they're doing. They're very proud of that job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you learn from Japanese hospitality that can make you an even better Ben OBorne? What if anybody was over here and was on the receiving end of this hospitality, this attitude towards people, this servitude towards people? What's the message that Japanese hospitality gives all of us?
Think about it really specifically. Some of the, and thinking about growing up in pizza restaurants and with many people that working in serving customers, etc. I think that some of those team members, from a Western sort of perspective, would almost feel a bit embarrassed to be so open and so kind, so many gestures, to be serving the customer, just so focused on their experience like that.
Yeah.
But it's the nature of the service industry here, and I think there's a good lesson in, if something makes you feel uncomfortable, it's okay as long as it's improving the situation, right?
I think it's uncomfortable for some because it's such a display, and we've used the word twice tonight. Egoless-ness.
Yeah. Yep.
It's egoless, and such vulnerability is so impactful, and so impactful that it can actually make people feel uncomfortable.
Japanese customers are also very respectful of the people serving them as well. There's finish a meal, you should wipe down your table, and you should collect all of the dishes together and stack them up.
Yeah.
It's just all second nature. It is a culture of great respect.
Well, Ben, I've been here 3 days, and I have been here before, even with your great company. And even in 3 days, my speech and my behaviour is modified when I go to Robert's Cafe. You know, when I go to a place for lunch, just because of the respect that I want to give back to them because of what they give me. And to be honest, I actually feel a softer, more beautiful person as a result of that slightest shift that they draw out of me because of the vulnerability, inverted commas, that they give me. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. But I think we're talking about things that you know. In fact, interesting, as we head towards winding this up, Ben, it's interesting for me that I'm not quite sure you do know how those ingredients, the essence of you that has created this young man at 34 years of age, that's you, into one that is so connectable, sees people with such equity, is empathetic towards people, loves to see them succeed, extracts joy out of their success. I think part of your secret is that you're not fully aware of the foundational ingredients. That's why this conversation for me, and I'm certain for our listeners, is going to resonate.
It just feels right though, doesn't it? To talk to people in that way.
Say that one more time.
It feels right to engage people. That's how you see the joy on your team's face.
Yeah.
When you achieve something together, when they've been engaged with it.
I think it feels right because I often say this, Ben, and God bless her beautiful soul. Maybe even Mother Teresa had an ounce of selfishness. And what I mean by that is, you know, her love for people was also founded in that it brought her a great meaning and joy. And how dare I say that is selfish? I don't really mean that. But in a way, there's always a reward. And maybe we become so acutely aware of the reward, of the joy and happiness it brings to us, that ultimately we say, it just feels right, doesn't it? Could be, mate. We're playing with our thoughts and our interpretation here. Finish it off, mate. Big question. Just got to ask it. You know, you sense there is a difference without acting as if you have difference with some of your peers, a lot of your peers. If you had to identify 3 values that you believe define Ben OBorne, that maybe others don't have to the same degree, and I purposely phrase it that way because I think if I ask someone what their values are, I think in reality you've got 100 values. You know? But if we're talking about the primaries, we're talking about the big ones, the ones that really dominate your essence. Are there 2 or 3 that you just know define you? What are they, mate?
I have to say, we've spoken about it a lot, but choose empathy. Choose to be empathetic. You know, there's no better way to connect with someone. Therefore, there's no better way to influence someone. There's no better way to motivate someone than if you can see the world through their eyes and share transparently from yourself the view from your eyes and come to understanding of that. So choose empathy.
Oh, I'm sorry. May I throw into that? Does that mean, in a way, that empathy is founded in an innate want to love people, want to connect with people.
That is the way that you do connect with people. Absolutely, it's that's what brings joy to life.
Yeah.
Right? If there's one thing that brings the most joy to life, it's connecting with people, friends, new people. For me, Kasha, and that's the backbone of that.
You're hearing it, folks. You're hearing it, folks. Number 2, Ben.
Number 2. Jeez. All right.
No country town excuses now.
Okay, so I really stand by, and when I'm talking with managers in my team who manage other people, I always will pull them up. Something I said earlier, but always will pull them up. And I start hearing words like, "Oh, yeah, my team this," or "Oh, these guys, I just can't get them to." No, sorry.
Yeah.
You succeed as a team and you fail as a leader.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a manager working with me and you're failing, I'm failing you.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. So succeed as a team, but you fail as a leader. You're going to take that ownership over it. That's the only way that you can push forward. There's certain things in the world you can't change. You got to focus on the ones that you can.
Yeah.
It's one of the most frustrating conversations that I have with people. When it mightn't be someone I work with, it might be a friend who's having troubles. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, that's they're your people.
Yeah. So leaders take full responsibility for the outcome that your team is producing. If there is failings amidst them, then maybe you haven't built the environment for them to succeed.
Almost, but the failure is on you, and you've got to take ownership of that because you're the only one that's going to turn that around. Yeah. Regardless of the situation.
Get you, mate.
The successes belong to the team, which you are part of.
Yeah. Love it. Sorry, mate. Number 3.
Number 3. And this is what I see in the greatest people and try to live by is you always challenge the status quo. It's the greatest people always question the way things are done around here. But they do so positively. There's never any malice or negativity. And they do so with great respect of the past. And great respect of the experience of those that they're talking to. The only way things get better is when the way things are done are challenged. But you should get off on the wrong foot with people if you don't approach that in the right way.
You don't do it in the right way. Again, the only reason why I come back and I offer another word is not to trump you at all. It's because I want our listeners to fully understand the guts of what you're saying. To challenge is also part of your whole perspective of curiosity. Why should we just accept that? Why don't we challenge that? I don't see that still exists today. Let's be curious about it.
Absolutely, yeah. You have a grand understanding from where it's come from, but absolutely.
Last question, pal. Then I'm going to wrap it up.
All right.
The question is, do you have a mission in your life? If someone said in a single sentence, why currently does Ben OBorne decide that life's such a wonderful, beautiful thing? Have you got a purpose statement? Have you got something that defines the reason why you get up each day?
I wish I could answer you and say I had a very defined, succinct mission statement and purpose. But what I do know is that I'm almost greedy for experience.
There it is. I greed for experience. You say greed?
I said greed,
I greed for experiences.
Connections with people, seeing new things, understanding something or why something is the way it is today. Hungry to learn, hungry for experience.
Well, mate, I'm out of place with what I'm about to say because here's expectation. No, that's too much. I can't put that on a 35-year-old. Mate, I won't be surprised with the ingredients that define you. And I think the major ingredient is there's a humility. There is, the highlight for me out of this discussion was when you said, "Oh, Bernie, I'm just a country lad." And I just hope people will be interested in me. That to me was my highlight, because there lies a definition of humility. But out of that statement of yourself comes a young man who at 35 years of age can have a ripple effect on hundreds of thousands of people. Maybe partly because you're in a country where there's 140 million, but also because you quickly been seen. All these attributes are so worthy and valuable. I don't even know whether those who have given you these roles actually recognise just how powerful and how valued. They just know that it is. They sense that it is. And that's why I suspect you have been accelerated. And buddy, I just can't see how those ingredients are ever going to hold you back from other greater opportunities. I look at your face now, I think you're half expected.
I didn't say that, though.
Well, I think you just know that they harness great value. And already in Japan, I know in your company that you have already stimulated and inspired great value. Mate, the podcast, this discussion was everything that I expected and wanted it to be. I thank you ever so much for joining us, mate, and for all that you've given our listeners out there. And mate, and for being a part of, join me, mate, a Journey with Bernie.
Mate, love it. Thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure.
Cheers, folks. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. That one felt better.
Mate, just sensational.